RTTs for Warhammer can be a great way to get a bunch of Warhammer games in all at once, taking only about one day, usually on a Saturday, to play about 3 games of Warhammer. It can be a really great way to interact with your local community, get better at the game, and generally just enjoy all aspects of the hobby at the same time. I've attended a fair few RTTs in my time, a couple of GTs here and there. The best result I've ever achieved was going 3 wins and 2 losses at a GT. Every single RTT I've attended, I have gone 1 win and 2 losses. So the goal here with this one is to try and do a little bit better than that. I'm typically a very mid-table level of player. I like to play relatively competitively, but I don't take the game overly seriously. I enjoy winning when it happens, but I have equally as much fun in a loss. The way I'm planning on trying to do a little bit better at this RTT, break my 1 and 2 streak, is to go incredibly hard on planning. So what does this mean? This means that I'm going to take a look at every single list that is submitted to this RTT and try and come up with a plan for how to beat it, depending on what round I face them in. And I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. Wish me luck. Before we get too ahead of ourselves and start looking at what other people are bringing to the event, it's important we go over what I'm bringing to the event and the terrain that we're playing on. For this event, I'm going to be playing my favorite faction, my big old boys, Chaos Knights. I've been playing Chaos Knights for a little over a year at this point, taking them to all kinds of events and leagues and such. I've been experimenting recently with a Houndpack Lance detachment, which, if you don't know, is the one involving all of the small little war dogs, so that's what I'm going to be bringing. The list that I'm bringing comprises of 1 Knight Despoiler, because you just can't leave home without it in the modern day of Chaos Knights. It has a Despoiler Gatling Cannon and 1 Demon Breath Thermal Cannon, which is a little different to what you might normally be used to, as well as a smattering of other smaller guns. It's a big old gun platform to go with the small knights. I then got 6 carnivores, because how can you pass up on them? In this detachment, you're allowed to take War Dogs as battle line, so it's impossible to just say no to 6 carnivores. They punch up into almost everything, incredibly fast, re-rolling their charges, incredibly good. We've then got 2 Brigands and a War Dog Stalker with a Melta and a Reaper Chain Talon to round out the list. Stalker, scouting forward, good little action trading piece for the beginning of the game. 2 Brigands for some half-decent Melta shooting and infantry clearing, especially when they are on objectives. I've also got a single Beast of Nurgle, 2 units of 3 Nurglings, and a unit of 10 Plague Bearers to sit on my home objective. Nurglings to hopefully stop me from being jailed in the early game especially, and a Beast of Nurgle to do some actions, hopefully. I should mention, as part of the list, I've got 2 enhancements. Both of them are going on 2 War Dog Carnivores that I've made characters as part of the detachment. One of them gives one of them the super heavy walker rule. He's walking through walls, incredibly good on a carnivore that's moving 14 inches. The other one is Panoply, Chaos Knight staple, I suppose, from the Index days. Basically just means he's -1 AP at all times, so a little bit more survivable than a normal War Dog is. We won't go over what Houndpack Lance actually does here and now. That'll maybe come in a future video, deep dive on some of the detachments, but the gist is that most of the stratagems and rules only affect the War Dogs. So let's now have a look at some of the terrain that the event is going to be running. For this 1-day RTT, they're using 3 missions that are on the modern UKTC maps. For round number 1, we've got Purge the Foe on a sweeping engaging deployment on this UKTC layout. I'm not sure what it is, I do apologize. So, rough game plan going into round 1 is going to be, you're going to see a lot of repeating themes here, but it's going to have the big knight hanging around the big central room in there. Because my Despoiler is equipped with a big massive Melta gun, if I'm within 12 inches, it becomes D6 plus 6 damage, so having him a bit further up the board than you might normally do is going to be a lot of my game plan here. There isn't a lot of sightlines on this deployment. You've got a big one crossing the center, but other than that, a lot of the sightlines are quite short. So I think the plan is mostly going to be deploy the carnivores, mostly just along the line, allow them to move their full 14 inches and still charge, rerolling those charges if needed, so they can fly across the board and hopefully alpha strike some enemy units if needed. The Stalker is likely going to be placed towards the top left objective, my natural expansion, so that he can scout towards it at the beginning of the game, get a nice easy hold of that, and hopefully threaten some enemy units that threaten to come towards it as well. You'll see a theme across a lot of these missions is that I'm probably going to start Carnivore in strategic reserves for most of them. Because I have 6 Carnivores, I don't really have any huge gripes about starting one in strat reserves. 5 running up the board at you is still incredibly scary, and having 1 to possibly jump down in your backline is incredibly scary too. On a mission like Purge the Foe, Knights I actually think are relatively favored in this. You can tell me if I'm wrong in the comments and such, but usually this is one Knights quite like. You don't give up, kill or kill more particularly easily, and because of your high amounts of OC on your bodies, you are pretty good at holding and holding more as per the mission rule. General game plan though, I think is still usually going to be try and get hold, kill, and kill more for 12 points on primary every single turn. I can almost guarantee every single turn that you get at least an 8 on Purge the Foe, so I believe where I'm going to get ahead of my opponent is probably going to be on kill more, simply because although I have a lot of units for a Chaos Knights list, they probably still have more units, usually more chaff, more easier to kill units is the thought. So, on to round 2, we have got Sweeping Engagement Terraform. Not the worst. Terraform is a mission I don't have a ton of experience into, but from what I've seen, Knights don't really mind it too much. The deployment of Sweeping Engagement here is obviously relatively good again. Deployment zones are typically quite close to each other along these long board edge deployments, which I think favors the Chaos Knights. Once again, 6 carnivores deployed on the line, moving 14 inches and re-rolling their charges at you is going to mess quite a few armies up if I go first. You will be able to see that although it is longer deployment edges, so there's a shorter distance between me and my opponent, there is a lot more shooting lanes on this one, so I do have to be a bit more careful. There's a lot of things like Tau running around in the metagame, as well as Necrons and their Doomsday arcs that I am very worried about, and so it is likely I'm going to be taking a more defensive deployment approach, probably placing my big knight somewhere around my home objective within that L, or within the L ruin on the right hand side here, just so that he is not exposed turn 1 horrifically. Once again, the Stalker is probably going to the right hand side of the board to try and take my expansion objective turn 1 and be relatively safe inside the little pocket on top of it. Some Nurglings as well should hopefully on that side of the board screen out my enemy from getting to me and stopping any scoring. I'm likely to have my Beast of Nurgle and probably my Carnivore that can walk through walls somewhere in the central ruin. This is for things such as an early Arid Nile, so that my Beast of Nurgle can scout out turn 1 and then hop into the center and grab that as well. The idea behind having the Carnivore that can walk through walls next to him is that I move him into the center of the objective to threaten holding that in my next turn, and if my enemy decides to come towards me with some kind of melee unit, or even just moves up into his central objective, I can actually reactive move away back through the wall of my ruin to make my Carnivore safe again. One of the many benefits of the War Dog attachment is all these little tricky, weird stratagems like that, so try and play around that this turn. In terms of missions for Knights, I think Terraform is actually rather good for them. Once again, if you go first on Terraform, you can typically Terraform all 3 objectives at once and start scoring them in turn 2. With Knight's incredible amount of movement, it should be relatively easy for me to do. If I decide to be really aggressive, I could place the Stalker on the very left-hand side, scout up 6 inches, move a further 12 inches, and even terraform my opponent's expansion turn 1, which could be a really strong move. I would be giving up a Knight for it, but it forces a pretty heavy response. Once again though, aside from scoring terraform points, holding objectives just gets you 4 points, which Knights obviously typically love. So on this mission, I'm hoping to essentially be getting a 10 on primary for the first couple of turns, holding my home, holding my expansion, and then having the middle terraformed and my expansion terraformed for another 2 points at the end of every turn. For the third round of the day, we've got a nice easy one. We've got Search and Destroy and Take and Hold as the mission. Search and Destroy is a weird deployment for Knights. You might have experienced this yourself, but it is quite easy to get trapped in your own deployment zone on this mission, especially when I have a lot of units that have quite big bases on this one. Like usual, my Nurglings and such will be infiltrating, likely towards the top end of the terrain, to stop an enemy getting onto my expansion turn 1, and so that I can move my Knight Despoiler out safely to hopefully hold that objective and get this lovely big sightline down the middle of the board, threatening to jump out into the middle of the map if need be with that big D6+6 Melta. I'll probably be starting one of my Carnivores in reserve once again, due to the lack of space in my deployment zone, and again for incredibly good rapid ingress threat to threaten his home essentially. Take and Hold in terms of a mission for Knights, once again I think is relatively good. We're 3 for 3 on good Knight missions. Because of the high amounts of OC that Knights boast on their smaller chassis and even the bigger ones, it makes it incredibly easy for you to just throw things on a point, and even if your enemy kill one of the War Dogs on the objective, you've still got 2 more there. 12 OC on the objective is usually going to hold most people off of it. The general game plan for this one, like I say, is going to just be holding my home, 10 plague rares, hopefully screening out my backfield to stop my opponent from getting it, and holding my expansion with my big knight. Usually getting about a 10 on primary for the first couple of turns, and hopefully in turns 4 and 5 getting a 15 by holding the middle or my opponent's expansion objective. I do think for this one it's a bit more swingy if you go first or second, as it is though with most missions. I think if I go second, I like my chances a lot more of getting a 15 in the final turn. However, if I am going first and my opponent gets the 15 in the final turn, that could throw things off quite wildly. So we're 3 for 3 on good missions for knights and some relatively good terrain as well, so things are looking up. However, things that could throw this off is obviously the difference between first and second turn. Most of these missions will favor a going second, and I'll tell you a little tidbit now. I've been tracking my stats for the whole of 2026. I believe I played, 15 games with my Chaos Knights, and I've lost every single one that I've gone first. So that's going to be a big thing I'm going to try and avoid in this tournament and also fix, is that if I go first, hopefully pull out some wins. Although, like I say, with these missions, going second is going to be more beneficial for me. It's all well and good looking at the terrain and missions before going to an RTT. Again, most people will do this type of thing, look at the missions, see what favors them, and figure out a general game plan. However, the thing I plan to take a step further now is to look at every single one of the people attending this tournament's lists and figuring out a game plan going into them. Lists aren't yet released. I'm currently recording this on the Monday. The tournament is on the upcoming Saturday. So lists are hopefully going to be released in the next day or two. So once that happens, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down, I'm going to go through every single list that an opponent has submitted. I'm going to put together a spreadsheet and hopefully try to figure out what my matchup looks like into them. And I'll be back to talk to you about that. And so I planned. Lists ends up being released on a little bit of a delay. Ended up being about the Thursday just before the event that lists were actually released. And so I sat down on Friday night just before the RTT for about 2 hours to search through every single list to try and come up with a game plan. In the planning spreadsheet, the way I have things laid out is I've got my opponent's name, so I should remember whose army is whose. I've got the army that they're playing, the specific detachment. I've got the stat check odds. The way I've done this is I've looked at the data from about the past 3 months for their army-specific detachment into their matchup against Chaos Knights as a whole, and implemented that into here to give me a rough idea of how the matchup should go. I then implemented a round 1, round 2, and round 3 odds. This is purely a vibes-based metric of how I think the matchup is going to go, based on either if I played it before, and if I won or lost that matchup, or generally how I think it should just go. I've then got a big old comment section full of general useful-ish advice. Do I think they have a balanced list? Do I think they're trying to stat check me? What kind of stratagems do I need to watch out for? Generally, what is their game plan going to be against me? And as the night grew on, I grew more and more tired, realizing that I probably needed to get some sleep before actually attending the event. And so as the list went on, the comments got shorter and shorter and shorter, although all still relatively useful. The way I would do it is I would pull up their list on Best Coast Bearings. I would then have a scroll through, and I would then cross-reference that with Wahapedia, where I'd be able to see data sheets and detachment rules and such for whatever army it was that I was researching at the time, and then input all the information I found into the spreadsheet. Some armies were researched a little bit more than others. Things like Space Marines, obviously everyone's played against Space Marines a million times. I feel like I have a pretty good feel for how they play depending on the detachment. Other armies though, however, needed a little bit more research. There was gentlemen there playing Harlequins, which I couldn't even begin to tell you what that does, so that needed a little bit more research, just in case I ended up playing into it. Eventually though, the research was done, and after putting the laptop down, it was finally time to head to the event and actually start playing some games. So, my round 1 was into Gareth and his Drukhari. Like I say, lists were released on Thursday, and I didn't roll around to the planning until about Friday evening, so I had a little bit more time to plan for this one. Looking at this matchup on paper, I was relatively scared going into this one. You'll hear horror stories of people who play similar heavy vehicle lists, that Dark Lances are the bane of all existence, especially on things like Scourges, who are run up, shoot you in the face with d6+2 damage, and then jump back behind a wall. It can be really, really difficult on paper to get around. And Gareth's list was no different. He had a unit of 5 Scourge, he had 3 Raiders, all with a Dark Lance, 3 Ravagers with 3 Dark Lances apiece, as well as a bunch of Cavalite squads split into 1 for scoring and 1 with all of the heavy weapons. He rounded that out with a couple of units of Incubi, 1 led by Lilith, and 2 Incubi units with Archons, as well as a Drazar, Master of Blades, running around on his own. 6 Venoms also darted about the field, being fast little movement pieces, somewhat difficult to deal with, moving his troops around. For round 1 here, you can see that I've mostly deployed everything on the board. I've got 1 Carnivore off the table in strategic reserves, as you'll see for most rounds. You might notice Gareth's side is looking a little bit barren. As you can see, all of his units are pretty much embarked within transports, and 3 of his Ravagers, as well as his Scourges, have started off the board in Deep Strike. So round 1, obviously, we're playing Purge the Foe, and Gareth ends up going first. So what he ends up doing is pushing up 2 small 5-man Cavalite squads in order to score him some primary, and to try and pick up my Nurglings turn 1 for some easy Purge the Foe points. During my round 1, my general game plan is to move up and try and get my expansion objective up here at the top, stage up behind this big ruin in case he decides to hop anything out in the center, such as the big Lilith unit, and generally push my units up the board only a little bit, mainly trying to screen him out for when his turn 2 comes around, so that he can't drop a bunch of Ravagers and Scourges in to shoot me off the board. The screening, I think, ended up being a really big part of this game. I think Gareth maybe started a little bit too much off the board here, and ended up being able to take a big advantage of that. Although I am Knights, I did have a large amount of units in this list, so screening was really quite easily for me. And we'll see at the end of the game, a lot of his stuff ended up having to deep strike into his own deployment zone because I left him no space across the board to get it down into a good position. By the end of turn 1, neither of us managed to score any points for killing anything in Purge the Foe, which is a little unusual. I ended up leaving a single Cavalite alive. Unfortunately, with 9 shots of indirect, I wasn't quite able to pick it up. However, he also didn't manage to pick up any of my Nurgling units, leaving 1 unit alive with 2 models left and 1 unit alive with 1 model left. So pretty good. I managed to get a secondary advantage here, scoring 7, whereas Gareth scored nothing, drawing Assassinate, bring it down turn 1, which is really, really tough turn 1. However, going into round 2, let's see what happens. So, I believe this one was taken at the bottom of round 2, so we've both taken our turns here. Gareth has moved up a little bit more aggressively. He's started staging his transports behind the big ruin in the middle. Both of these boats here have the big units of Incubi, led by characters, so I'm really trying to avoid them hopping out and charging my big knight. So as you can see, I've staged 2 War Dogs up to try and screen him out a little bit, as well as a Brigand sat next to him in order to shoot anything if they try and come through the walls. I've moved my Plague Bearers out and up towards my top objective in order to screen out my backfield a little bit more. I've created a little bit of a traffic jam in the top left-hand corner of the board there with a Carnivore being stuck. However, I ended up using Uppy Downy strat at the end of my opponent's next fight phase in order to pick him up the board and reposition him in my next turn. In this turn, too much again didn't really happen. I used my indirect to finish off some Cavalite squads in order to get me some Purge the Foe points. I moved my Beast of Nurgle out to the center in order to try and provoke a response so that my opponent doesn't let me get hold more for this objective. I leave my Nurglings in combat across the top objective. I'm out OCing him on the point, so I'm holding that as well, and I'm stopping him from being able to do things like actions. Turn 2 ends up going pretty well for the both of us. Gareth ends up getting 12 points. I believe it was for hold more, and kill in his turn. And in my turn, I ended up getting hold, kill, and kill more for 12 points apiece. Once again though, I managed to get a bit of a secondary lead here with 9 points on secondaries to Gareth's 3. He ends up holding Bring It Down in hopes that I would bring out a War Dog for him to kill easily. However, this was mostly another staging turn for me. Again, just firing indirect any units that I can get an easy kill on. At the end of battle round 3, this is roughly what the table looks like. As you might notice, there is possibly a Carnivore in his backlines, you know. He ended up leaving me a nice little pocket behind this ruin to drop a Carnivore base in, and so I rapid ingress that in his turn, and on my turn charge out to try and kill this boat, which, spoiler alert, I leave on 3 whole wounds, which was really upsetting. However, it did end up provoking quite a big response from Gareth in order to deal with that. I continue to consolidate onto my top objective here in order to get some more points. I move my Walk Through Walls Carnivore out to, once again, hold this. He kills the transports and consolidates back onto this objective. I bring in the Carnivore that I picked up off the table down here at the bottom to try and consolidate a big threat towards that bottom objective in my next turn. My Brigand moves out to shoot some infantry units of his, try and get some more damage on some of the boats. My Big Knight here stages up in order to try and get into a better position, so next turn he can hop out onto the middle objective and lay down some serious firepower into any of the remaining boats that Gareth tries to bring up. Turn 3 scoring ends up going really well for me. I managed to get Gareth only to hold and kill. I believe he finished off one of my Nurgling units, whereas I managed to score a big 16 for all of the points basically. Only a 4 for Bring It Down. I unfortunately don't score Storm Hostile here because Gareth only holds his home and I wasn't able to get onto it, and even if I was, I couldn't have out OC'd him. So it was literally impossible. Probably should have redrawn it. But again, a small mistake here that didn't end up really costing me anything. So, battle round 4 here. Much like I say, the Big Knight's hopped out into the center objective. He doesn't have too many lines on any of the boats, however, he is projecting a big massive threat. Gareth has brought in all of his boats. As you can see, a lot of them are stuck in his home objective, so I'm really happy with how I managed to screen him out and keep him back there, as they didn't end up being able to do all that much throughout the game because of this. Still consolidating my top objective, he's able to go nowhere near it, as I have a carnivore causing chaos in his backlines. I hold the middle, I hold the bottom with one of my carnivores, as another one of my carnivores goes out to try and destroy his boat to stop him from taking it back. What Gareth ends up doing this turn is finally getting the Lilith unit in action. He hops out of the boat that is still on 3 wounds, I still never managed to kill it, and he runs it towards the central objective. However, I was really worried about this. However, it turns out Lilith's unit is an infantry blender and not much more. They really didn't end up managing to do all that much to the Big Knight in the end, and I was able in my turn to just shoot them off the objective and wipe them up with a little bit of melee. By this point in the game, Gareth has nothing left in reserves, everything's on the table, and he's mostly stuck in his home objective, and so the game begins to kind of run away from him and into my favour. He scores an 8 for holding and killing, I score a 12 for holding more, and killing only one thing. I believe we matched on kills this turn. I get a full 9 points on secondaries. I managed to get a 5 on Marked for Death, which is quite surprising, by getting some lucky melta shots through on a boat. He does decently with a 7 on secondaries, but like I say, by this point the game is mostly over. Looking here at turn 5, we can see I hold every single objective on the map. My home is stickied, I hold his home, I hold the 3 in the center. He's got 1 boat left alive down in the bottom right hand side, and he's got 2 others still just chilling out, and that's mostly what he has left. I have managed to mop up almost everything else, and like I say, the game is pretty much over from there. So again, really happy with how I played this. This is a lot more units than I'm used to having left at the end of a game. However, it ends up really paying off. I'm able to snowball really hard and kind of score big in this final turn. And so looking at that, it's another 16 points for me. So I managed to max my primary. I got 9 points on secondaries by scoring Assassinate and Establish Locus in his home deployment zone. And unfortunately, there are no points for Gareth. He unfortunately doesn't manage to kill anything. He doesn't hold any objectives, and he is able to score nothing on the secondary, sadly. So that brings us to the end of the game, 98 to 54. So really high scoring for me. I was really happy with how I played this. Gareth was a lovely opponent. We had a lot of fun throughout the whole game, and yeah, really swell guy. I think the game plan for Gareth for this game should have been probably to get the Incubi more involved in the game earlier. I believe he only started bringing them out in turns 3 and 4. However, I think he should have staged them behind the big ruins and brought them out probably in turns 2 or 3 to try and just jam me up, even just screen me out. If he stops me from moving forward, it means I can no longer screen the board as well, and it means his Ravagers can come down in better positions, get better line of sights, do better shooting on me. The Ravagers though, once they did come down, I do believe Gareth got rather unlucky on some of the dice rolls. I believe I could probably count on one hand the amount of Dark Lance shots he actually ended up damaging Knights with. And I think they didn't even kill a Knight throughout the game. I think most of the Knight deaths came from melee, which was really upsetting. I think overall he played quite alright though. Just a few little minor mistakes there, and again, really fun game. So no, feeling pretty good after this one. Again, a high score is always fun. So yeah, let's take a look at round 2. So round 2 here was against Ivan and his Space Wolves. 2 big massive Terminator bricks, one with Logan Grimnar, one with Arjak Rockfist, which terrified the shit out of me. He's got 3 Ballistus Dreadnoughts, a smattering of some Hunting Wolves and some Head Takers for some scoring, as well as some Wolf Scouts that you can see deployed quite aggressively in my face. So I have castled up relatively behind this big central objective. I am very concerned about the turn 1 deep strike that Logan Grimnar offers, and so I've tried to screen the left side of the board with my Nurglings, The right side, I have my scouting stalker up there to try and kind of push out the turn 1 deep strike. So Ivan ends up going first here, which 2 in a row going second for me is usually pretty good. He has obviously started Arjak's unit in deep strike. He started one of his ballistas in strategic reserves, as well as a unit of head takers. Everything else is on the board. Once again, you might be able to see I do seemingly just have a lot more units than my opponent at this point. And so with this, I was hoping to use that to my advantage once again, screen out the board relatively well if I went first to try and stop the turn 1 deep strike. However, because he has gone first, he is able to just get that for free, sadly. So turn 1 ends up being alright for both of us. I score 8 points on secondary, he scores 7. We both play it relatively passively. However, he does drop the big brick of Terminators right in the central objective. I shoot his Wolf Scouts to death. However, don't aggress much more than that, because I am very wary that there is now 2 bricks of essentially 4 wound Terminators sitting behind his big ruin, waiting to just kill me. So again, play relatively safe. I move my Stalker up the right hand side to terraform. He terraforms the middle and the left hand side objectives. And yeah, not bad turn 1s. So turn 2, as we can see, he has brought the big Terminator brick in at the end of my movement phase in turn 1, and it's now sitting in the central objective, which is really scary. And in response, you'll be able to see I have moved the hell back. I've left a single brave little beast of Nurgle sitting there to hopefully try and soak up the charge if he does choose to charge me in his turn. And I've moved my 3 carnivores and my despoiler back in order to kind of counterattack if he does decide to go for it. I've started slowly creeping up the left side of the board. I've taken his objective away from him to deny him some primary, and hopefully if he doesn't come for me, terraform it in my favor. I'm still holding my bottom right hand side objectives. His ballistas are still relatively sitting back, somewhat out of position, I would maybe say, not really threatening any of my knights. And so in this turn, I mostly like the position that I'm in. However, we'll see shortly that it does quickly come crumbling down. In terms of scoring for the second turn, we both do relatively well. I score 10 for holding 2 and then 2 points on terraform. He scores 12 with an 8 on holding and 4 points on terraform. Neither of us score any of our secondaries, which is really, really big. I mean, you'll be able to see in a little bit here, but it was a very low scoring secondary game, which is quite a shame. I think if I scored a lot more secondaries, again, I would have done much better in this game. Yeah, quite an unusual turn for us both, but turn 3 is where things really begin to happen. So here we are. I believe this is taken at the bottom of turn 3. So Ivan has brought in his Ballistas Dreadnought from Strategic Reserves up here. I have rapid ingressed my Carnivore on the right hand side of the board to begin trying to threaten his home objective, in which in response he brings Bjorn out too. His Terminator brick with Logan is still in the center, and his Terminator brick with Arjak has moved over to the left hand side objective to try and retake that from me. This turn was pretty much what decided the game, I think. He tried to have a really big go turn here, where he moved his Terminators out to the right hand side to try and charge my Brigand that is sitting on my expansion objective. I believe it was a 6 or 7 inch charge, which he failed. He moved Arjak's unit out to the left hand side to try and charge my Brigand that I've moved up, which I believe was only a 6 inch charge, and again he failed it. I believe there was one more charge somewhere else that he also failed, so Ivan really wasn't feeling too good at the end of his turn 3. You know, stuck in the middle of the table. He was worried that I was just going to take advantage of that and blow him off the board with it after all the failed charges. And so obviously I was feeling pretty good about that, and so that's what I tried to do. However, you might be noticing that I'm missing quite a few units. This Logan unit in the middle of the board ended up being a really, really big deal for all of this game. I charged 3 carnivores into them, 2 carnivores and my stalker into them. I sent my other carnivore up towards the left-hand side objective to try and charge into Arjak's unit to do some damage, and I moved my despoiler out to get line of sight onto Arjak's unit to hopefully shoot it to death. The problem ended up being that I did a whole lot of nothing. So I shot Arjak's unit, I believe picked up 2 Terminators, and then when I charged my carnivore in, I tried to precision out Arjak, which completely failed. I handed him 2 4-up saves, and he passed them both. It was really, really annoying. I was trying to get around the fight on death that unit is able to do with Arjak in it. However, just completely failed, and Arjak crumped me in return. So What happened next was Logan's unit then interrupted for 2 CP, which ended up being huge. He picked up my Stalker and my other Carnivore, leaving only 1 alive, which was really, really annoying. I had only left myself 1 CP in this turn, so I didn't have enough to fight on death through the Vectora, which was the entire plan. Yeah, stupid mistake, only leaving myself with 1 CP. I believe I used it for a tank shock up on the right-hand side here on this Carnivore into Bjorn, which was completely unnecessary. Bjorn ended up living through the tank shock and the Carnivore fighting, which, again, I think Bjorn should have died here. I believe he made 2 5-up saves to live, even though he only had 6 wounds left. So that ended up being really quite big as well. But the big thing here was, yeah, just doing essentially 0 damage to this Logan unit. I think I picked up 2 Terminators with the single Carnivore's melee, but it ended up being nowhere near enough. And so because the 2 Terminator units took very little casualties, Ivan was able to essentially run away with the game with them. It ended up not being a bad scoring turn. Again, I get 11 on primary, he gets 11 on primary, I scored 4 on my Storm Hostile. I, however, failed my Sabotage, I believe just because I simply didn't think about it, and I ended up deciding that I wouldn't have done anything differently, so I shouldn't have gotten the points. Ivan got, again, 0 points on secondary, which was, I believe, the only thing that I felt was keeping me in this game here, was the low secondary scoring, and so I really needed to take advantage of that, I think, to stay in the game. However, like I say, it was mostly over from here. Turn 4 is pretty simple. Bjorn moves up the right-hand side to take my expansion. I basically send the last of my shooting and my melee into the Arjak unit, as well as the rest of my Plague Bearers. They get him down to 1 Terminator and Arjak left, and that combat essentially kind of stops there. It doesn't really matter from there. He holds the objective. The Logan units, I take 2 more Terminators off of, but they are still not dead. I'm unable to terraform this middle objective back in my favor, same as the top left-hand side. And the Terminators also just out-OC me at multiple points throughout this game. And so yeah, it's relatively fast. He kills a few more things. He gets 10 points on primary, he gets 9 points on secondary, which is really, really big for him. I only get an 8 on primary for holding my home and 1 other objective, and I get a big fat 0 on secondaries, which is huge. Had I done more damage to the Logan unit in the middle of the game, I could have gotten my assassination and area denial, but it just wasn't feasible, unfortunately. So really, really kicking myself for leaving this Logan unit alive. So final battle round here, my big guy comes out, my Beast of Nurgle's in the center. Basically all this turn is him cleaning up the rest of my units. I shoot Logan to death in the middle of the board to finally get my area denial assassinate. Things are mostly from here. He has so much more units left than me that are able to score and do secondaries, etc. So in the final battle round, I score a 10 on primary because I bottom of turn. Ivan, however, scores a huge 17 just with all of the units he has left, which is massive. He gets 7 points on secondaries, I get 10, which somewhat keeps me in it, but unfortunately, we still fall just a little bit short. So it ends up being a victory to Ivan. Overall, I was actually really impressed with how close the score ended up being. Like I say, after the end of turn 3, I felt like this was going to be a blowout on my part. I was going to get destroyed. However, keeping it within 12 points, I was actually quite pleased with. Like I say, we both really struggled to score secondaries this game. Probably what could have helped that was if I went after the Logan unit purely. Instead of trying to split my attention between the Logan unit and the Arjak unit, I could have focused solely on the Logan unit, wiped that off the board, and then all of my other units could have been used to score, terraform, things like that. Again, trying to split my attention between the 2 Terminators unit cost me a lot of points and units in the end. So I think Ivan ended up playing this game really, really well. The turn 1 deep strike in the center of the board, on paper, I think was a not great move. I think if I had moved up and shot him a lot with my despoiler and taken advantage of his very greedy play, I think it would have been bad, but in this scenario, again, I misplayed and I failed to deal with it, and it ended up crushing me at the end. So yeah, Wolfguard Terminators are very, very scary. 4 wounds with -1 to wound is a hard profile to break through. But yeah, he played the terraform mission really, really well. He managed to terraform 2 objectives for most of the game. He ended up getting 4 points for terraform most battle rounds, which was, again, really, really good. Helped him max out his primary, and again, yeah, played really well. So yeah, going into battle round 3, we are 1 win and 1 loss. So let's go over how the final game went. Game 3, the pictures are a little more all over the place, so I do apologize. You know, it's only a one-day event, but Game 3, you're still running on fumes, so I do apologize. What we can see here is, I believe this was at the start of Battle Round 2, so I have moved out to threaten his expansion objective in the bottom right-hand corner. I've sent a carnivore out essentially to force a response from him, and if he does nothing, I'll hopefully hold that. I have moved a brigand up to hopefully try and support the carnivore once it dies, or re-threaten his expansion objective. I've staged up my carnivores along this line again, along the central ruin. My walk-through wall's one in this very corner here, along with my Beast of Nurgle, meaning I'm able to project a really large threat, either towards out into the center, towards my expansion, or towards his expansion, if he chooses to aggress any of those. I've got my big knight sitting up here behind this ruin. I really like putting a knight despoiler somewhere along this backline here. Threatening this massive sightline is really, really good. I think it stops him for most of this game from moving his Hecaton land forts out. You know, puts a huge threat of shooting around my natural expansion to stop him from aggressing it. So I'm really, really happy with where he ended up. And I think he played, although he didn't kill too much this game, he ended up playing a really big role, I think. For this game, a lot of my indirects ended up just going into his Berserker units. I was really scared that a 5-man Berserker unit would probably pick up a War Dog. So Battle Round 1, I ended up indirecting his Berserker unit sat behind this big ruin here, down to one singular guy left, which ended up working out well in my favor. Although I believe he was saving on 4s with a 4-up Feel No Pain. I rolled relatively high, he rolled relatively low, and I managed to do some decent damage to that unit turn 1, which was quite surprising, and I think did help me in the end. So, scoring for turns 1 and 2 ended up going really, really well for me. 6 point in secondaries on turn 1, 3 on secondaries in turn 2, but a 15 on primary was huge. I think getting this 15 here really set me up nicely. Him failing to take me off his expansion, or my expansion, was, I think, really big. It's expected in Taken Hold that you probably just get a 10 on primary for most turns of the game until about turns 4 and 5. But getting a 15 in turn 2 is usually a pretty good indicator that you are in a really good position, and it ended up working out really well for me. He ends up getting a 5 for holding his home in turn 2, and ends up getting 5 on secondaries. So looking at the, I believe this was maybe the end of Battle Round 3, you can see I'm still projecting this threat down onto his expansion objective, in order to try and force a response. I have rapid ingressed a carnivore down here to, again, if he kills my brigand that's on his objective, to resend something towards his expansion objective, even just to sacrifice it, even if I don't hold it in my turn, just to keep him off of it. I've consolidated a lot of knights up here towards my expansion. My big knight has hopped the wall to tow this terrain piece if he needs to shoot down the middle as he begins to move these hecatons out. And I've moved out into the central objective. I believe it was to get area denial, and he has responded in tow with some units in order to try and take it off of me. You can see here, this brave little stalker up here at the very top of the board ended up, I'm not sure if it was all too impactful, but my opponent ended up dedicating a lot of firepower into this stalker, leaving it on 1 wound for 2 different turns, failing to finish it off with any of the indirect fire that he had brought, or the bikes, which he was able to rapid ingress in the top left-hand corner to try and shoot the dog to death. And he just didn't manage to. So big old distraction Carnifex sitting in his face ended up being really quite nice. But again, the game plan as usual, hold multiple points on the board, try and kind of force him to take his expansion back off of me. The scoring for turn 3 was pretty good. I got an 8 on secondaries and a 10 on primary, putting me in a pretty good position, whereas my opponent only got a 5 on secondaries and a 5 on primary, which again, really, really nice. By this point, I am 15 ahead on primary at the end of Battle Round 3, which puts me in a really, really good position to kind of snowball this game. So this photo here, I think, was taken at the end of Battle Round 4. There's no end of Battle Round 5 picture, unfortunately, so we'll just kind of talk through what happened from here. So again, I continue to threaten his expansion. He begins to fight my Beast of Nurgle in the middle. I believe he fails to kill it in the end. My big knight finally tows the terrain to project his big threat down the center of the board to finish off that unit, try and force the hecatons to come out and focus fire on him instead of any of my dogs. The idea here being that the dogs are the things that are going to end up scoring me secondaries or threaten his home at the end of the game here. So if he kills the big knights, you know, I'm not too fussed about that. So I've still got my walk through walls carnivore here, staged in my ruin, projecting a big threat towards either his home or his expansion. At the end of the game, what ends up happening is he finally disembarks a unit of Thunderkin from this back hekaton here, and then he brings out a 3-man of Thunderkin into this unit here. So really good shooting units. However, it was only to shoot the Beast of Nurgle and this War Dog down in the bottom left here, which didn't end up actually doing too much. These are really, really powerful units that I think my opponent just waited far too late to get into the game. We were looking at it later, but this 6-man Thunderkin unit, with a combination of stratagems and spending yield points and stuff like that, probably pick up the big guy 9 times out of 10 in a shooting activation. So to have them stuck in a transport for most of the game, not doing too much, I think was a mistake that probably cost him a lot of points this game. In terms of Battle Round 5, things continued on as normal. He drops a unit of bikes in this ruin here, just in the corner of my deployment zone to get a 6 on sabotage. I continue on to get a 15 for bottom of turn scoring, which is to be expected with taking hold and the amount of units that I have left. And yeah, the game's mostly over from there. Once again, looking at scoring for battle rounds 4 and 5, my opponent gets a 10 on primary in each. He gets a 5 on secondaries in turn 4 and a big 10 on secondaries in turn 5. He had a lot of units left, which I think allowed him to get a really big secondary score here. However, it unfortunately was not quite enough. In Battle Round 4, I get a 10 on primary and a 9 on secondaries, which is really, really huge. And then in Battle Round 5, I get a 15 on primary and 8 points in secondaries, which almost pretty much seals the game for me here. So a huge amount of primary points here for me, I think is really what helped me win this game. I managed to score a lot of secondaries simply because my opponent didn't really want to move out or try and kill any of my dogs all that much, which I think allowed me to mostly just run away with this game. So ended up being 94 to 67 to me. So another really high scoring win, which I was really, really quite happy with. I quite liked how I played this game. Once again, I held my expansion guaranteed. I was constantly sending threats for him to deal with on his expansion. Didn't expose too much towards the middle, so that he wouldn't simply blow me to smithereens, and also wouldn't give him an in to charge my unit in the middle and then maybe make it into my backline somehow. But yeah, I was really quite worried about this matchup going into it. Votann have a lot of really scary firepower, and in my opponent's list, he really did. You know, a 6-man unit of Thunderkin with another 3-man and the Hekaton land forts, as well as the Sagittar can do some relatively decent firepower. And the melee pressure from the Berserk units were also really, really scary for me. However, I think my opponent just played a little bit too defensive, allowed me too much board presence, too much board control, and that ended up, I think, costing him the game. But no, again, really lovely opponent, really great game, and that finishes us out for the event. So, 2-1. I managed to improve and actually beat my previous record at any other RTT. I was really, really pleased with this result. Although the amount of planning, as we'll get into, I think could have been a lot more, I'm actually really happy that it seemed to have paid off. You'll also notice that I managed to nab myself a nice little 4th place, which is the highest I've ever placed at any event. Again, it's only an RTT, but still incredibly proud of this result. My only loss in round 2 was to, obviously, Ivan, who ended up coming in 3rd place overall. So really, really happy with how I did. So, what would I do differently going forward? So, I think I want to try this kind of concept again for either an RTT or a GT and put in a significant amount of planning, like I imagine most decent players probably would. As you'll be able to see, this planning spreadsheet was rather hastily thrown together. It ended up being finished at about 11 PM the night before the RTT, and as we go down the list, you can see the notes get somewhat shorter and shorter. I added little bits and pieces on the morning of the RTT as I sat preparing. But yeah, the planning, although helpful, could definitely have been better. I want to streamline the process quite a lot. You'll be able to see I've included the stats from StatCheck, obviously, which ended up not being too great. Some of them, I think, just didn't accurately reflect how I felt the matchup was going to go, so I'll probably remove that in future. The win percentages that I've included for how I think the matchup would go across rounds 1, 2, and 3 were somewhat helpful, although I found myself not really looking at them as a metric. I'd rather, I think, just go into a game and try my hardest to win, rather than look at a stat that says maybe I've given myself a 45% chance of winning, and then go, oh, well, I don't have to try too hard, because if I lose, then I was going to lose, obviously. And I just don't think that's the way of going about things, really. For the comment section part of the document, I think I want to expand that quite a bit as well. It was really helpful. I found myself looking at that most of all throughout the event. However, I think it could be broken up into more pieces to make it more useful. I think rather what I do is put in a section about what I think their army is trying to do overall, then include another section of some rules that I think I mostly need to pay attention to, things like stratagems or just datasheet abilities their models may have, and then a third section of how I think I should play the game. You know, it doesn't have to be long, just pressure early, you know, sit back, shoot them off the board, that type of thing. I think that would really help. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching me ramble on about how my games went in that. I had a lot of fun at this RTT. Again, 3 phenomenal opponents. I attend the RTTs run by these guys all the time. They're really great fun, they're really well run. I've got another RTT coming up around the middle of April that I'm hoping to put in a similar level of planning into, you know, practice what I preach a little bit. And again, we'll see if we can reach another 2-in-1 result. Obviously, I try not to keep my expectations too high, as much as I would love to say I'm trying to go 3-0. I think, again, I'm going to keep my expectations somewhat reasonable and say I would like to go 2-1 again, and I think I can achieve that with a better amount of planning. So, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any questions, comments, leave them down below, and I'll try to get to them. If you have any advice, obviously, I'm very much open to hearing it. I am by no means a professional player, so literally any kind of tip is appreciated. But yeah, that's all for now, and I'll hopefully see you again shortly. So goodbye for now.